Everyone loves video games. They can transport you into a magical land of fantasy, color, and wonder. However, not every video game takes place in a wonderful fairyland with rainbows and candy. Some video games can be positively bleak, showing us harsh, cruel worlds with all kinds of ugliness and creepiness in them. I grew up in the 1990s, an era that held more than its fair share of dark settings for video games. It was a time period when the cutesy world of the 1980s went away and a more adult or at least adolescent vision of games came about. I played quite a few of them, and they left quite a mark in my impressionable little mind. And I often find myself thinking about how dark and gritty and mean-spirited a game can be. Not all of these games are from the 90s on this list, but that was the era that Grimdark seemed to thrive. The criteria to make it on this list is a game that presents a world and story with extremely unpleasant, sad, violent, cruel, or hopeless elements, making for an unsettling place where there are no happy endings, plenty of moral ambiguity, and a persistent sadness or emptiness with everything. Grimdark isn't just bad or sad, it's over the top in how crazy, depressing, miserable, dark, violent, or horrendous it is to the point of ridiculousness or melodrama. So without further ado, here are the top 5 grimdarkest video game settings. Number 5. Demon Souls. The Souls series of Japanese action RPGs has exploded across the gaming scene in the last few years. Their brutal difficulty has made them unique in the modern era of checkpoints every 5 seconds games so common today. But another unique aspect to them is the aesthetic design of their worlds. All of the Soulsborne games take place in some kind of apocalyptic setting where the world has been destroyed in the distant past and the pathetic remnants of the old world struggle against hope in the ruins of mankind. All of them have an air of loneliness, emptiness, and erosion of civilization. But none of them are quite as bleak as the original Demon Souls. Demon Souls takes place in a kingdom that has been gripped by a mysterious fog that shrouds the land, causes the souls of heroes to rise up after their death, and zombifies the inhabitants. Not every section of Demon Souls is very grim, but the 2 darkest areas, the Tower of Latria and the Valley of Defilement, more than make up for it. Demon Souls doesn't have the best gameplay in the series, but it does have the best atmosphere. The Tower of Latria is a labyrinthine medieval prison complete with torture devices, monstrosities, and squid-headed tentacle monsters. And Section 2 of Latria is a bizarre tower with an ugly Lovecraftian beast suspended in midair by sorcery. But the saddest area has to be the Valley of Defilement, a massive swamp you explore in pitch darkness with a strange rainy filter over everything. The swamp's final boss is an especially unpleasant encounter with a saintly maiden named Astraea who massacred her brother knights, rather than continue their dark crusade against the valley, and remains there to be a beacon of worship to the wretched, weak, and lost who have nowhere else to turn. Add to that a pervasive toxic atmosphere in the murky swamp that hides the rotten, fleshy bodies of aborted fetuses, and you've got one hell of a grimdark setting. Oh, and by the way, it turns out the player is the bad guy in this situation. Astraea is just trying to help people, and you waltz in there to butcher her and leave the valley empty of any light or hope. Nice job, Mr. Hero.
Do as you like. Take your precious demon soul.
Number 4. Fallout. Fallout has become one of the best-known and popular video game series in history, selling tens of millions of copies worldwide. However, way back when the series started in 1997, you never would have predicted that. The original Fallout games were bloody, difficult, and had a distinctly harsh vibe to them. Later Fallout titles have a much gentler, relaxed version of post-apocalyptic America. New Vegas even had a tourist industry, bright lights, hotels, and police streets in the capital. But the original Fallout games were very grimdark. The world was bleak, grimy, and filled with danger and ugliness. Maybe the top-down perspective which forced you to always look at the floor accentuated this, or maybe it was the incredible soundtrack. But something made the game creepy and unsettling. The final boss of the game was a twisted, bizarre monstrosity that looked like a monster from John Carpenter's The Thing. The early games also focused a lot more on the scary, repressive, and violent aspects of pre-war American culture that led to the horror of nuclear conflict, creating an unsettling and depressing mood of people scraping together tiny bits of lives in a pitiless environment. And I can't emphasize how much that moody, horror-film-inspired soundtrack helps to make you feel uncomfortable and weirded out. The original Fallout was a game of survival against impossible odds in a bleak world, unlike Fallout 4, which is downright bright and cheery in comparison. The ghoul-infested, super-mutant-covered monstrosities in the wasteland of the original Fallout game is always going to be one of the most grimdark game settings ever made. Number 3. Silent Hill 2. The Silent Hill series is one of the icons of survival horror, a genre more than any other designed to have creepy, unsettling atmosphere. The games about the Little Maine resort town became the king of horror in video games by eschewing jump scares and stupid teenagers, I'm looking at you until dawn, in favor of complex themes of psychological horror set in Francis Bacon-inspired hellscapes. It's tough to pick the darkest Silent Hill game because all of them, at least all of the early ones, are brutal, unflinching examinations of madness, cults, abuse, and demons. I'd argue that the third and first games are easily the scariest of the bunch, but Grimdark is not synonymous with frightening. Grimdark is not about being scared, it's about a world with no hope, unrelenting pain, and the absence of happiness. Just like a certain definition of depression. Depression is not about feeling sad, it's about the inability to feel happy. Chronic depression and a depressing atmosphere is why the second Silent Hill game is my pick for the grimdarkest Silent Hill game. In Silent Hill 2, you take on the role of James Sunderland, a man with, well, I can't spoil it, but he has some serious personal issues. Very serious. He and a few other people with broken spirits and dark thoughts wander around the ruins of Silent Hill. The town is a marvel of video game artistry with exceptionally drawn backgrounds that resemble some real-world destroyed or abandoned towns. Garbage and grime are everywhere, buildings are walled up, and an oppressive gray fog shrouds disfigured creatures lurking around every corner. It's a magnificent externalization of a state of chronic depression. All of the main characters are victims who have suffered in some way, yet they're also far from innocent themselves, and our feelings about them are ambivalent as best. Silent Hill 2 is a world lost in a fugue state mixed with despair and decay. No one is truly good or bad, the monsters are pathetic blind creatures created by our own subconscious, and the town itself is a taunting, hostile energy goading us to self-destruction. And the music of the series is absolutely extraordinary. There's an ambient kind of grinding, industrial power to it that makes everything sort of unsettling. Like the entire world is gradually becoming unhinged and oppressive and crowding around you to crush you. A demon god may be scarier, but a void-like emptiness of moral ambiguity, confusion, and confrontation with your own cruel and nihilistic thoughts is definitely more grimdark. Number 2. Dreamweb. Ah, cyberpunk. If we didn't have that subgenre of science fiction developed in the early 80s, we wouldn't have grimdark. Cyberpunk took the cheerier, brighter, and cleaner world of prior science fiction and used the urban decay and crime of the late 70s, early 80s to create a future of grime, turmoil, confusion, social alienation, and sadness. Grimdark ended up being a natural extension of those moods and themes into a more generic science fiction formula instead of obsessing over the internet and transhumanism. Dreamweb is a point-and-click adventure game from 1994 that takes place in a dystopian future version of London. You play as Ryan, a lower-class nobody with a dead-end job and no prospects who begins to experience strange visions and blackouts. Ryan becomes involved in an eerie and very violent plot to seize control of the planet's destiny through a magical artifact. I can't say much more than that without spoiling things, but suffice it to say that Ryan's journey is a very bloody and dark one, including such things as a character being ripped in half and crawling across the floor with her intestines trailing behind her before she speaks her last words to you. Ryan, who may be suffering from severe mental illness, feels trapped in this situation that he's had no choice in being a part of. An overwhelming sadness or depression is a major theme in the seminal cyberpunk work Blade Runner. Decker's and the world's misery contrasts with the glittering technological advancements of the future that have yet to make people happy. Dreamweb is also a very depressing game with the main character being trapped in a web beyond his comprehension. He's forced to do terrible things to survive, and his generally miserable personal life isn't very good either. The vision of the future is one of alienation, crime, depression, and moral decay. All of this is emphasized by the incredible soundtrack. It's a magnificent score filled with Blade Runner-esque electric ambiance, 1990s-ish techno, and jazzy sadness that produce a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. And let's not forget that ending. Dreamweb has the most over-the-top bad ending screen in game history. The remaining powers of the Dreamweb have united, destroying the Keepers and opening the gates to other worlds. This has brought evil and chaos through the Dreamweb, evil that has been channeled down to the thoughts and dreams of the human race. Your death remained unnoticed by billions of people. In reality, it affected every other human being. The cities grew. Pollution increased, the skies clouded with dirt. Big money won. Fascist governments prospered on greed and persecution. The world expected and received war. War on a global scale. The nuclear threat was evident. All hope was lost. Millions burned in the fire. Yeah, it's about as bad as it gets. Take that, Friday the 13th. Number 1. I have no mouth and I must scream. The coveted biggest asshole in science fiction writing would undoubtedly go to Harlan Ellison. A man with no little talent and no little ego, Ellison has gained a decades-old reputation of being nasty and combative to quite a few people. So it's no surprise that he had a hand in making one of the least pleasant game worlds in video game history. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream takes place in a post-apocalyptic Earth where all human life, aside from 5 people, has been utterly destroyed in a massive war. The war was caused not by man, but by a robotic intelligence in charge of defense systems similar to Skynet. This robot is called AM, as in I think therefore I am. The remaining 5 people have the unfortunate privilege of surviving the nuclear fire only to be imprisoned by AM and subject to never-ending hellish torture. You take control of these 5 characters and lead them through 5 separate nightmare visions of torment concocted by AM to punish them and the player. They include a bleak, empty wasteland complete with steampunk Zeppelin torturing the elderly and women hung on meat hooks, a tribal society that AM rules over as a god and demands human sacrifice, and easily the worst of the bunch, a Nazi death camp complete with barbed wire, starving prisoners, and unnecessary surgery on children. Every part of this game is meant to create a hopeless situation in a horrific landscape of human suffering, hopelessness, and cruelty. And to top it all off, Ellison originally wanted to make the game literally unwinnable. You were supposed to fail and be defeated by the supercomputer no matter what you did. Fortunately, they changed that and you can win the game, though it takes a Herculean effort to get everything done correctly and achieve that, at least without using a walkthrough. The more common ending is the one from Ellison's original story, where you're transformed into a bizarre blobby monster and forced to live for all time being tortured by a robotic entity with no ability to express your own suffering. For telling a very serious story with flawed, corrupt, occasionally evil characters, for broaching the most serious subject matters like depression, rape, and genocide, and for being a damn hard game with a brutal opponent like AM, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is the most grimdark of all video game worlds.
I thought that I could once again play the gallant knight and defeat the evil monster. But the others were right. My character was too flawed, and all my secrets unraveled. I thought AM hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally. The other 4 are dead, finally free from their tortures. AM is all the matter for that. It makes me happier. And yet AM has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Michael. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And please put a comment down below if you liked this kind of video, this sort of top 5 that I do. It's something I haven't done for quite a while, and I had so many grimdark settings that I had to leave a ton out. So if you'd like to see another video with another top 5 grimdark settings, I have plenty. Please leave that down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I've linked 2 of my other videos here, one for my series about Planescape, one for my series about Warhammer 40,000. Please check those out and see if you like them. Thanks.